Amazing. So guys, hello all. Hope you guys are all well and you're having a great week. Tonight, Middlesex University Product Design Engineering and Design Engineering are super excited to host the 4th talk in the annual guest lecture series. So this series runs weekly throughout the academic year on a Thursday evening, bringing together a vibrant mix of speakers from across the full spectrum of design and engineering. Tonight, we're delighted to host Dr. Andy Bardell and Dr. Kate Hurd of Middlesex University and redLoop. So half of the participants, obviously all of the BA product design students, the BA product design engineering students, they're familiar faces as the core academic staff on your programs. And for all of the other participants, obviously Andy's and Kate's detailed bios, the qualifications, the learning and teaching interest, research outputs, all of this was linked and shared in the email ahead of the talk as well. But just a quick short introduction. So both Andy and Kate, alongside obviously all of their academic roles at Middlesex University, are also the respective director and associate directors of redLoop. What's redLoop? It's a research-led innovation and design collaboration center in the Faculty of Science and Technology at Middlesex University, London. I'm going to share the screen. Amazing. So who's Andy? If you don't know already. So Andy, before coming to Middlesex University, had an industrial background in advanced avionics systems with expertise in communications, radar, navigation, laser ranging, and target seeking. His academic career began in teacher education. So he was a curriculum leader for design and technology for around 3 years. And then he went on to develop product design and engineering alongside Professor Mehmet, the head of department currently in the year 2000. Subsequently as well, he went on to initiate redLoop with several colleagues to build capacity in the university to respond to research, knowledge transfer, and partnership opportunities. Kate, before she commenced as a lecturer at Middlesex University, she worked in and across the design industries in positions such as professional model making, as a product designer as well, working in innovation, product development with small, medium enterprises. Kate also completed a PhD at Middlesex University. Andy was one of her supervisors alongside Professor Mehmet Karamanoglu as well. And if you wanted to obviously read their full bios, feel free to click on any of the links that were sent ahead of the talk as well. So guys, it's an interesting one today. 2 talkers, 2 guests. So feel free to gather your thoughts, your questions and your comments in the chat throughout the talk. You can direct them generally to both of our guests, or you can direct them to any one of the 2 as well. We'll have Q&A at the end, and there's an option as well if you guys want to go live and interact with Kate and Andy at the end of the talk. So over to Kate and Andy now with a talk titled Design as a Conversation, Resolving Uncertainty and Working in Teams. It's all yours, guys.
All right, I think we'll probably start. So we've been introduced. I'm Andy, Kate's on the screen, and we run this thing called redLoop, which is Design and Innovation Centre, and we are doing design. So the talk tonight is about design as a conversation, resolving uncertainty and working in teams. So we're going to talk to you a bit about what we think about design, and then do a case study of a group of student interns working with us on a design project, going from relatively naive new designers to a professional level of design work for a real thing with a real client, leading to patents and commercialization. Okay, so something we think about a lot. How do we design? How do you do that? Well, of course, we know about the design process. We get taught about the design process. This probably won't work now. There's a video there. It's not working. It's working. That's free. So Google the design process. Look at the images that come up. You see lots and lots of images of what the design process is. And there's all kinds of stuff there. Circles, lines, wiggly things, Gantt charts. And there's endless numbers of them that all call themselves the design process that we apparently follow. We keep scrolling and there's endless more models to the design process. Some things repeat themselves. Right? Scatter graphs, all sorts of stuff. Wiggly lines, look, research, concept, design, stuff. It goes on and on. So is that helpful to you as a designer? Which one do you choose? Which one do you pick? How do you follow it? Well, we don't think design is a process. It's not a process at all. It's a practice. Again. So we'll wait. Here we go. Design is not a process, it's a conversation. And we firmly believe the dynamics of the two things are different. Processes, you go from one thing to the next. It defines how you do things. You do one thing, then you move on to the next, and you move on to the next thing. Conversation is a different thing. So where does that come from? Well, I'm quite taken by the work of Donald Schoen. So Donald Schoen, professor in MIT, dead now, philosopher, worked in urban planning. And he said that design is a reflective conversation with materials. He was one of the progenitors of reflective practice, a reflective conversation with materials. And interestingly, he says there's no direct path between the designer's intention and the outcome that was to achieve. As you work a problem, you're continually in the process of developing a new path into it, forming new appreciations, new understandings as you make new moves. So it's reflective. Of course, your materials are broad. What are your materials? You've got people, you've got technologies, you've got devices, processes, systems, platforms, places, desires, aims, purposes, business models, timelines, budgets, and more and more and more than more you know about design. All collection of materials to have a conversation with. What kind of conversation should you be having? Google tells us there are 4 types of conversation. You've got debate, competitive two-way, dialogue, cooperative two-way, discourse, cooperative one-way, and diatribe, competitive one-way. What kind of conversation should you be having? Clearly dialogue, cooperative two-way conversation. Your conversation with the materials, your conversation with your colleagues, your conversation with your clients. That helps us. Design is dialogic. Schoen tells us that design is reflective, a reflective conversation with materials. Anything else? Oh. It's also a thing. It's the stuff we make. Design is a plan, a specification. The design, the result of the process. It's also a verb. To design expresses the process of developing a design. So we can say that not only is it dialogic and reflective, but it's also active. It's about doing things. Design. Action, dialogue, reflection. So in essence, action, we do something. Then we think about what we've done. Then, hit my key, we do something else. Dialogue is the conversation that we have with our materials, and we do things and we think things. But you don't have to start with doing, you have to start with thinking. You can think something, do something, and then we think again. It's really important you do both. You don't just think a lot and do nothing, or more often do loads and never really think about it. Do, think, think, do. But in reality, of course, is that you think, do, think, do, think, do, think, do, think endlessly until you get to, ta-da, it's all done. Although, always something else to do. So, design is what? And it's not moving to the next screen. Design is always big, messy, underdefined, interdisciplinary problem. It gets bigger and bigger the more you think about it. And doing it just makes things bigger and messier, yet more things to define. So, we'll just give up, really. It's too hard. Where do you start? Where do you start? Well, design is questions, not answers. Ask the right questions, and the answers are obvious. Dialogic. What's the first question? So, you can ask questions. I was at an exhibition some time ago at the Design Museum, We saw this thing and stood and looked at it for quite a long time, pondering. The first question we really need to ask is, what is it that we're designing? Because it's not always obvious what we're designing. If you can answer that question, it puts you in a much stronger position. So this is VDU, Video Display Terminal to access a mainframe computer. It was designed by Olivetti in 1966, which puts it in its time frame. What was being designed? It wasn't just a functional artifact. Of course, it had to function, but they were also designing a new way of working, which was a new kind of work. It did not exist before. They were designing an aspiration. They were designing the future, using new technology to do new things. Lots of doing, lots of thinking to produce something that's brand new, functional, in my eyes, beautiful. What's been designed there? Very similar thing. Problem being, though, somebody had done an awful lot of doing and not very much thinking. So we end up with something that's not very beautiful. It's also quite outdated now. These used to litter the university with the way that we access the AV systems. We've got something that's equally as bad now. It gets pushed into a corner of the room and around. So it's important to ask, what have we designed? And it matters. That's Victor Papanek. He's dead now as well. But he's one of our design heroes. It really matters what you do and what you think. So why Victor? Well, Victor wrote this book, this tome, 1971. It's a modest volume, it's easy to read in 1971, but it's full of absolutely huge ideas, which still have currency today. Thoroughly recommend reading. In the foreword, Victor tells us this. I'll read it all out, probably not. There are professions more harmful than industrial design or product design, as we now call it, but only a very few of them. And possibly only one more profession is phone advertising, and persuading people to buy things they don't need with money they don't have and in order to impress others who don't care. It's probably the phoniest field in existence today. Industrial design, us, by concocting the tawdry idiocies bought by advertisers, comes a close second. Never before in history have grown men, because only of course in 1977 could men design things, women are allowed to design as well. I sat down and seriously designed electric hairbrushes, blah, 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 and all kinds of other gadgets. Before, in good old days, if a person liked killing people, they had to become a general, purchase a coal mine, or study nuclear physics. Today, industrial designers put murder on a mass production basis. And so on and so forth. And the skills needed in these activities are carefully taught to young people, the other aspect of our job. Victor's a good guy, he's a good thinker, read his book. So, that's what we think about design. It's a conversation, it's about doing and thinking, it's an iterative process. We'll do a case study now. So how do we do it in reality? Well, Kate and I work in something called redLoop, design consultancy. We run that, but we have a team of people who are students. So each year we take a number of design interns who come to learn about design with us. They contribute to real world projects and in so doing, learn huge amounts about design. They don't all start out as experts. We don't recruit experts. We don't want experts. We want people who are keen to learn and can learn through the process. So what you'll see is our place of work. But what you'll see is a design conversation unfolding. Okay? These are my design interns, our design interns at that time. And you'll see a learning process. Learning how to resolve uncertainty, how to work effectively as a team, how to get to grips with a project with a really previously inexperienced work rate, how to get to something done in the right amount of time. Okay. So what were we designing? Well, the question we have to ask ourselves, this is a typical project entry point. What we've got is a piece of technology and an aspiration. This piece of technology is revolutionary. It allows dentists in real time to detect the presence of oral cancer. Wow, cool thing. What are we asked to do? Well, the first thing we're asked to do is to help, to make a magic glove covered in printed electronics that could make this thing perform. So we had to spend a long time with the client, gently persuading them that it wasn't a good idea to make a magic glove for a whole host of reasons to do with plausibility, feasibility, manufacturability, cost, and then simple things like dentists are sometimes left-handed. They have different sized hands. They're already wearing gloves, etc., etc., etc. So we get to a new resolution and a new concept. The initial concept diagram you can see here, because you have to produce concept diagrams to say, this is the way things are going to be. This is what we're going to design. And we spent time before starting this part of the project designing this magic new electrode, a flexible electrode that can fit to a finger to couple with the electronics to be able to detect the presence of oral cancer. So we've done that. We've engaged with a manufacturing company. We've got them designed for manufacture. We've got electrodes in place. What we now need to do is to take the technology and encapsulate it so that dentists can use it in a clinical trial. We've got information about how dentists do oral inspections for oral cancer. Away we go. So concept diagrams, they're really, really important. You can see lots of concept diagrams in this presentation. They need to clearly and succinctly say, this is what it is. This is a concept diagram we did for a brain-computer interface, including multi-sensor electronic skin, so you can get feedback from the robotic hand. Brain, robot, skin, back to brain. So, what are we doing in this project? We've got some base but underdefined technology to encapsulate. We've got to make a box. The technology is going to change, it will develop. The technology can be optimized and miniaturized. It needs to be wearable. We've got an understanding of the use context and the examination scenarios. There are loads of unresolved debates about how the product should be used and how users should interact with it. It's got to be made ready for clinical trials. And should those trials be successful, there's an ambition to commercialize. So there's a whole host of design intelligence there, but we need to decide what is it we're designing. So if we look at that, we can say, well, we can move forward with the president. We've got to expect change. We can negotiate to agree the typology and parameters of the change in the technology as it emerges. It can be optimized. So we've got an eye to the future. We have to have an eye to the future potential. First clinical prototype is going to be a high fidelity tech rig. The form factor, the device typology should move with the conversation into the commercial domain. So we can produce assets that say this is a commercializable device. It's not just something that exists within a laboratory. It's got to be wearable. What does wearable mean? Well, not a glove. Have a glove on already. But it will have profound effects upon the outcomes and the response from your clients and your end users. Obviously, we can use activity-centered design to develop the device that can perform its intended function. And through the design conversation, we can enrich that use case. Who is it for? How do they use it? When do they use it? Those kinds of things. We've got to engage in product user interaction because the people producing the technology can't. So we have to enrich the use case to explore what the user interaction could be and test it through experience prototypes. It's got to be functional. We need a high fidelity prototype up and running to do the proof of concept trials, a clinical prototype. We've got to resolve the conversation about what the future could be. We've got to do that through visualizations and experience prototypes as assets that we can show to potential future funders to say, this is a plausible, feasible, functioning device, and it's compelling. It looks like this should exist. So, let's design it. 3 things. Wearable prototype that we can use for clinical testing, product and user interactions, and the future. Simple. We resolve uncertainty. We start. We all know about product landscaping. Well, we do if we study product design. You don't design in a vacuum. You have to immerse yourself in that landscape and get a good sense of it and make sense of it. In simple terms, if you want to design something that people want, then you need to understand what people want. And all of the information is out there. It's not copying, it's research. Product landscape. So we look at a whole host of different things. We look for themes, we look for inspiration, we look for design insights. We see bracelets shaped like a magic sea. We see power charging stations. We get interested in foldable tech, flexible tech. We look at how things conform to the body because we're trying to design something here that's wearable, that's not yet existed. Jewelry.
and how it conforms to the form of the human body. We get very interested and excited about how things could be done and how things could be embedded. Start to look at things like cybernetics, tattoo electronics, to gain inspiration, to gain design intelligence, to gain insight. Look at superheroes, so we can have superhero dentists who can magically detect all oral cancer. We come back to this, because this seems to have the most potential, the magic C. We've got a dentist who's examining someone, they see something that they think is suspect, they need to put the device on quickly, connect the electrode, and do the test. Test will tell them whether to refer to a GP or not. Magic C. So we've got a decision. Now, in all of these conversations, we do and think and do and think and do and think, but we have to come to a waypoint where we go, that's it, we've decided, now we're going to move forward. So we move forward, and we all agree that that's what we're going to do. Because if you're going to work effectively as a team, you don't want different members of the team going off on tangents doing different things once you come to that decision point. So we're all designing magic C. We start drawing. What do we see? We've agreed that C-shaped form factor. But what we see are a whole host of different drawings, drawing different stuff, some of which are magic C's, some of which are magic rings, some of which are bracelets with strange stuff on. What we're lacking here is constraints. We're not going forward with the same constraints. So the constraints are really, really important to us. They're not only important, they're really helpful. So how do we get constraints into something like this? Oh, bend a piece of wire. We make the wire fit. And we can draw things that mean something because they're constrained, which then pulls the team back onto track again. And you have to have that constraint. That's one of the principal constraints that we have. So we start to make models. Models are meaningless if they don't follow the constraints. The initial drawings are meaningless. When you draw something, when you model something, when you prototype something, it has to mean something. Constraints bring meaning. You bring constraints in, the model now means something. It can fit to the risk, because that's what we've agreed the size and shape needs to be. It can be an encapsulation, a space envelope, because it can encapsulate the electronics, it can encapsulate what we've been told the batteries will be. Now we can model and we can iterate and we can explore effectively as a team, because anybody can participate in that team. We get to a decision. We decide. It's wearable, it conforms, we can go forward. Finish doing thinking, hit the waypoint, move to the next part. We need to make a clinical prototype. So let's start to get to grip with details. Now what we've got is a set of drawings which are all done in different styles, some of which are better than others, but what we've got are drawings which now mean something, because we're using the same form factor, we're using the same size, but we're starting to investigate the details of how the clinical prototype can come together. All kinds of details, how it works, how it fits, where it goes. But what's important is the conversation that takes place, the interaction with the drawings. And what you'll often see in product design is one person drawing on somebody else's drawing and all of the words that surround that interaction and that meeting to get to a place. And we continue. How does it fit together? How do we make two things come together to encapsulate our stuff in this particular context? With lots of stuff happening around that. Lots of meaningful exploration there to make this clinical prototype. And we get to a point where we start to get to our next waypoint. How do we fit something together with one screw, one fixing point? Gone from our initial constraints from 2 dimensions into something which is now makeable and realizable as a clinical prototype. Single screw, slides together. Can we do it? Well, we investigate now further. We start to think, well, how do we encapsulate it? How do we slide it together? How does the lip and groove work? So we've got people now thinking about the right level of detail and working more effectively as a team, because these drawings have come from a whole host of different people. Always going forward, what's become that key artifact, that key drawing, the key concept. And then we explore. We increase the fidelity. We go from a drawing to 2 dimensions into 3 dimensions, some very interesting approaches to looking at compliant materials, looking at comfort, different modeling, to a final 3D printed prototype. We haven't got 500 3D printed prototypes, 2 here, because we know what we're doing and we've got there. Because we have the constraints, it fits and it works. Good. We can move forwards. Meetings. Things change. So the circuit board's got bigger, the battery's changed, it's got bigger. So as we said, we go forward expecting change, but we as product designers can anticipate that. And once we're into CAD, we ensure that all of our CAD models are fully defined and parametric. So what we need to do is change some dimensions, change a curve, change a line, and we have the new product. We negotiate. Negotiate about how much more change, about power, about porting, about purpose. And we end up with the next iteration. Next iteration now has a power bulge. Don't underestimate the complexity of this CAD model. Speak to Joe, who's one of the guys who worked on it, Joe Salem. Various different clinical prototypes coming together, which encapsulate the technology, slide into place, and will function as our clinical prototype. Cool, tick VG, we've done it. Or we've done the first one. We've got our clinical prototype. This is not the final one that went forwards. The final one is transparent, so that you can see all the pretty lights inside, because there are many of them to actually get the thing to function. Product user interactions. How do you do that? Well, through experience prototyping. We take a feather, Adafruit feather, which is an Arduino variant. We take a LiPo battery. We build an armature so it can be worn in exactly the same way. And then we can start to experiment with product behaviors using that form factor. So we don't ask questions like, what can it do? Because it could do a whole host of things. We ask key questions like, what should it do? When should it do it? How should it do it? That works ongoing because it's key to the final thing and as the clinical trials take place. I've also been asked not to show you the prototype. At least I can show you more this time. Last time we gave this talk, most of it was blacked out. So we continue. We've got a team now. People really working as a team. People getting stuff done and taking real decisions, moving things forward. We've got to move on to designing the future. We've got a clinical prototype. We're establishing product user interactions. What would this look like as a commercial device? Well, we know it can be made smaller. We know it can be optimized. We know it can be put into different places. It can be worn in different ways. So we can experiment with that. We have to keep an eye on, it's got to be wearable, it's got to encapsulate the technology, it's got to do all those things we've talked about. But we've got to make some decisions about how we move forward, how we establish those key artifacts so that we can work again as a team. So we establish some design themes, again, by looking at what already exists. We chose 3 themes. Here's one thing. You can see how all of the imagery relates together and how it might relate to the device. Second theme, third theme. So we developed all of these to final concept stage. Lots of iteration, but always looking at constraints. I think this was theme 2, starting to emerge. I'll talk you through theme 2. So we're getting some drawings now which are more meaningful. They start to look more like the drawings of a product designer. We're getting there. What's really important is how we talk about the drawings. So the conversation now is looking at a cross section. That's what's important to us at that stage in that conversation. About porting, about displays, about how the thing might work. Drawings are resolving. We're starting to search for not only functionality, but how to make something look beautiful. Here, what we're actually doing is looking at how to make a CAD model of this thing, because it's getting quite complex in form. How do we drag cross-section around a spline? Onwards, forwards, iterating, developing, going back to our original constraints. Will it work? Will it fit? Drawings from all different people in the team, all drawing the same thing, all moving the same thing forward. Getting close. Getting to a point where we're almost there. Happy with this bit, Happy with this bit, not happy with this bit. So what do? We keep those this bits and everybody designs this bit. Searching for beauty. Till we get there. We go, that's it. That's what we want. We've got a drawing. And when you compare the quality of this drawing to the quality of the initial drawings, we've made major step changes in the way that we're visualizing things and the way that we're conducting our studio practice and conversing with each other. Once we get a gold star and a TPG. And a sign off, waypoint, decision made, move forwards. Because we need to charge it. We need a charging dock. We need to use it. We need to check that it fits. But now we're really drawing. We're really getting it. And then we make some character. Ta-da! We're there. We have our commercializable product, which we can put into context and we can explain to our potential funders. From brief to final concept. We can explain what it does, we can explain how it works, we can get people to buy into the future, we can show that we can show the reason to optimize and miniaturize, we can show the different place that it can be worn, we can show we can have a single-handed operation. Interestingly, we can also show how we can modify the device typology to make it fit various users. We can explain haptic interfaces and how we can help dentists to feel the quality of the tumor, potential tumor that they're looking at. And we can get involved in optimization by shortening or changing the path of the electrode. Takes us to an endpoint. Takes us to a really interesting endpoint. A really interesting endpoint is what product designers often do. We've helped you to develop new intellectual property. We can file a patent. That patent's now filed, which is why we're allowed to talk to you about it. And it takes a long time. Kate and I last gave this talk 4 years ago. I think it was about 4 years ago, and we couldn't show anything. 4 years later, the patent's been filed. That's just filed, not granted yet. Patents, huge thing. I was going to show you some patents and what appears in there. I have to end the show, which I don't really want to do. So I'm not going to do it. We'll forge ahead. Anyway, I was going to show you the patent. You can look online for the patent. But in there, if you look at the drawing section of the patent, which I might be able to flip through at the end if we've got time, you'll see all of that design that we've done in terms of the device form, the device function, the haptic interface, how it works, how it looks. You as a product designer can contribute huge amounts of intellectual property and of course the electrode as well. So there's your case study. We do lots of this kind of work and we do all different kinds of work. So for example, here's one we did over lockdown. This is a clinical prototype for a very high fidelity clinical prototype for a tibial nerve stimulator. What's that? It's something you wear on your leg. It electrocutes people and does stuff. Medical significance. Final prototype. We can turn it on. We can adjust the level. We've got an indicator light. It can be worn. It's a cool thing. Far cooler than they ever imagined it would be. Wouldn't look out of place on a stormtrooper. So, high fidelity prototypes, clinical prototypes, functioning prototypes, very important. Come on, PowerPoint. Concept diagrams, we do lots of those. Got smiling. So last year's group of interns were involved in this. This is a deep brain stimulator. So what's it do? Well, we've got coils which activate stuff in the brain with electromagnetic fields. We've got EEG electrodes. And what we can do with this is solve or mediate the symptoms of things like Parkinson's disease. So we can sense brain activity that causes tremors in Parkinson's disease with these electrodes, and we can use EM fields to block those neural pathways and prevent the tremors from happening. Sounds cool. We've got an EIT system which allows us to allow users to take smart drugs with doped gold nanoparticles which cluster around, for example, a brain tumor, so we can image a brain tumor in real time. We can put those gold nanoparticles into vaccines, so we can see where the vaccines end up. We can put them into drugs, so we can see where drugs end up. To get anybody interested in that, you've got to explain an extremely complex set of science, chemistry, biology, biomedical engineering in a concept diagram. What you need is an extremely talented set of interns who can put that concept diagram together. Who sat with me here? Pfizer, Sahar, George. We do a lot of work on lung imaging. So this is one of the outcomes from a project that's now finished called Cradle. This was a £5.5 million project to do real-time lung imaging of premature babies, non-invasive lung imaging, using this magic device here and this magic device here, which we did an awful lot of, and I can't tell you anything about it because the work that we've done is again subject to a patent filing. But this took us on, after that project finished, to the next project, which is now active, still active. It's called Numacrit. So it takes that technology even further. Concept diagram produced by interns, obviously under our guidance, for a brand new magic belt using printed electronics, organic electronics, wireless communication, wireless power transfer to do real-time lung imaging of babies. Alongside that, when COVID happened, we got emergency funding to repurpose this technology for real-time lung imaging of COVID patients, which is where we developed some very significant new technology in terms of the patient wearable, which is why I can't talk too much about this. That's the patent that should be filed. We're still wrangling over ownership and percentages and all of that, but once that's done, the patent will be filed and we'll be able to tell you all about it. That's what we can do as a product design. What else do we do? Huge amount of stuff, black screens. This was a cool project. We collaborated with the RF Museum, who found an aeroplane at the bottom of the English Channel and didn't know what to do with it. So we did the public engagement strategy. I'm going to flip through this, and you find yourself on your hands and knees on a runway, on a taxiway, drawing pictures of big aeroplanes. That's me and Kate. I still love that photograph. Some time ago now. Great people to come and paint lines for you. You paint pictures on carpets. Get on the news, you go out to sea. Product design's cool. You get to engage the public with stuff. You get to build huge things. You design interns with Spike. You make big media installations. You make augmented reality apps, which can conjure up digital versions of that thing as it was back in the Second World War. You can place them all over the world using magic technology you develop with colleagues in computer science. Website there. Okay, cool project. We've been working with Alexandra Palace to do a whole range of stuff. It's a cool place. It's the birthplace of television. 100th anniversary of television this month. 100 years since the first broadcast of television by this guy, John Logie Baird, with one of his first television camera. His first prototype television camera. We developed loads of assets for exhibition, for education, for public engagement, which then sat in the studio over lockdown and over COVID. We're about to transport them up there to take part in that 100th anniversary of television and also to commemorate their new collaboration with EMI. And then it's the 150th anniversary of the Alexandra Palace itself. So they're all going to be used for public engagement. So we've got stuff which was amazing fun to produce. So this is an original John Logie Baird television, and this is a television camera, all functioning, all working, so we can explain to people how television works, how cinema works, how projection works, how persistence of vision works through 3D, automated, animated, zoetropes. Cool project. So that's not bad, is it? 44 minutes. What do product designers do? Well, they do really important stuff. And as Papanak tells us, our design hero, in an environment that screwed up visually, physically, and chemically in 1977, it's no better now, the best and simplest thing that architects, industrial designers, and other people could do for humanity will be to stop working entirely. So give up. In all pollution, designers are implicated at least partially. He says design can and must become a way in which young people can participate in changing society. So it's important. And you are the next generation. We're the past, you're the future. Make sure you do things and think about them in a positive way. Okay. We're done. Bang on 1745.
Amazing. Amazing. Do you want to share the patent thing now, or do you want to do it later towards the end?
Do it now. I've got a black screen, which may or may not come back to Zoom. Everything's running really slow. Here we go. Everything sort of comes back. If you've never seen a patent, they're interesting things. They take a long time to write. They're legal documents. There we go. So you get a lot of words. An apparatus for assessing biological tissue, etc., etc. As you can see, I'm still having problems with the computer. There you go, lots of words, say stuff, but perhaps more interestingly to us. This is a draft of the thing. Some of the embodiments, some of the stuff that you can contribute as a product designer, initial concepts, the electrodes, our design against their specification, but principally how it can be manufactured. How do we make these things? And how do we make them at scale? Lots of stuff to do with electronics, stuff like that. Things about MAL, 3D, maths, stuff, which underpins it all, which is what your amazing engineering colleagues will do. There you go, the device, what it looks like, how it hinges, how it charges, how it's worn, how it's alternatively worn. All forms part of the pattern. The haptic interface, how the controls work, etc., etc.
That's brilliant. Andy and Kate, obviously a fascinating talk. Really good case studies there as well in terms of design as a conversation. So a really good overview of the process, examples of studio practice and client-facing work, alongside obviously at the end, a snapshot of activity at redLoop and different projects as well. To all of our participants, obviously feel free to continue to gather your thoughts and questions and comments in the chat. There's a few coming through, which we'll kind of tackle now. If you want to go live and you want to ask questions and interact with Kate and Andy, feel free to obviously put the request in the chat as well, and we'll make that happen. So first and foremost, a question coming in from Irene. So, and the questions regarding the prototypes. So are those prototypes that you were showing in the presentation hypothetical, or are they real working prototypes working with people?
There's a whole host of prototypes there. Three principally. So you've got a clinical prototype, which works. It has to work because that's going to do the clinical trials. Those clinical trials become a key asset in saying this product works, this thing works, it actually can detect oral cancer. That's now out on clinical trial. The experience prototype for number two allows you to develop the product interactions and the way the thing works, which is a key thing that product designers do. We're all interaction designers. So yes, it works. The third things are what the future looks like. So they're concepts. So they allow us to say, this is what the future can look like and require further funding to get you to that stage, but allow you to gain significant intellectual property to say that also not only can be the future, but it belongs to us. So therefore it makes it fundable. Does that answer the question, Irene? Yeah.
Amazing. So a great question coming in from Tony Smith, and it relates to the overall theme and the title of the talk in terms of working in teams and resolving uncertainty and so forth. So Tony's question pertains to working with people across multiple design disciplines. And in terms of like the question, Tony's asking that he assumes that you work with people across multiple design disciplines for product design, graphic design, you know, like people situated within like biological design, biomedical sciences. How do you work with people across these disciplines smoothly so you guys can all agree on a direction, since you guys have different expertise, you might be working towards the same or different goals as well?
It's a really interesting question. It's a key question that Kate's going to answer.
It's a really challenging one when you get different disciplines all around the table working on a project like this. And generally the product designer becomes the person who facilitates a lot of the conversations to allow the project to move forwards. because you have teams of people with very differing expertise, differing languages, differing backgrounds, interpretations of the design problem that you're dealing with. And generally the product designer is the one with the broadest understanding of all of those things, who knows how to get people to connect. And through conversation, through sketching, through prototyping, you help people to have the right kinds of conversations.
Amazing.
So in all of those products that you saw, all of those projects, you're working with what I referred to as large heterogeneous design teams. So there's lots of different disciplines around the table. So it's key as a product designer that you understand as far as you can what those disciplines are. So you can share language. You're speaking about the same things. You understand what it means to write software. You understand what it means to design electronics. You have an understanding of functionality and what's going on. You also understand the needs of the clinicians. But what you mostly do is listen. You listen to things and you listen carefully and you ask key questions. You don't go in talking and shouting and saying, this is how it's going to be. And if you've listened carefully enough and you've asked the right questions, you can then produce a drawing or a visualization. And once you've done that, then you're leading things, because people will start to refer to the drawing and refer to the scheme and refer to the plan, and everybody starts moving in the same direction. That's how it's done.
Amazing, brilliant question as well. Another question coming in from Manuel, and it's talking about the constraints that you said, drive the design. So how do you go about, kind of coming towards these constraints? Emmanuel's asking, what's the best way to find them or discover them and define them? How do designers know they have enough constraints in terms of, moving towards product development?
That's a great question. Really good questions. You ask questions. What are we designing? What does it need to do? Who's going to do it? How will they do it? When they do this, what will happen next? What should happen here? What should happen next? And you go and ask what seem like very straightforward questions, and the answers seem like common sense, but until you've asked the questions, you don't know the answers. And that's how you establish the constraints. And when you don't know something, you quickly recognize that you don't know something and go and find the answer out. How do you know you've got enough constraints? Well, because you'll be able to move forward meaningfully. And when you show your stuff to the other people in the team, to the other disciplines, they'll agree with you and the whole thing will make sense. Is that a good answer, Kate? Do you want to add anything?
No, I think it's good. The only thing I think I would add is certainly looking back at the projects that we've done, knowing what the endpoint of the project is really important in establishing whether you've got the right constraints, because designing something for an initial prototype is very different from an end goal of designing something to go into manufacture, because you're going to end up going down very different pathways. So knowing the constraints, not only in terms of moving your own design work forwards, but knowing the constraints of the wider project, I think is really important.
Amazing. Amazing. Superb questions again, guys. Another question coming in from Irene. And this relates to, I guess, your experience and the background knowledge. So she's talking more specifically towards the design of prosthetics. So do you think that designers and product designers and product design engineers can work in these types of projects? And for example, she's talking about prosthetics, understanding materials such as hydropolymers, nanosensors, for example, saying where you would need knowledge within other disciplines, chemistry, electronics, material sciences. So is that background knowledge necessary? How do you acquire that knowledge? And how do you then have conversations with researchers that allows you to kind of define those constraints and come to those interesting questions that you guys were talking about?
Working with specialists is not only fascinating, but it's absolutely imperative, because as a product designer, you don't know very much at all. What you've got is a kind of open, inquiring mind that can pull things together and say, this is how the future should be. This is the plan. This is what we can do. So you value those specialisms, and specialist people will solve the problems that you need solving. And then you can put them together to make the product. So it comes back to conversation. It comes back to asking questions and listening very carefully to the answer. It's how you work. It's how you work with those specialists. You can never know everything. How can you possibly know everything that those specialists do? And if you could know everything, then you wouldn't need those large teams. You could just get on with it.
Amazing. Okay, would you add anything to that?
No, just to say it's absolutely possible that you can work on those projects, but you do have to just take that attitude and get used to learning things very quickly, especially learning the language so that you can actually have the right conversations.
What you have to do, which is imperative, is earn your seat at the table. Because those people around the table know an awful lot. You need to make contributions as the designer, which is why you need to listen carefully, ask the right questions, and come up with a plan, come up with a drawing. So why not like this, folks? By understanding what everybody needs, what everybody wants, and what everybody can do. If you can do that, you'll earn your seat at the table. And then you need to continue to prove your worth to the team. And then you'll be invited back again and again from project to project. It's absolutely true with a lot of the projects that we do. We provide a pivotal role because we're the interface between what takes place in a research laboratory and the world of manufacturing, because we understand how things are made. We understand how to get things made. I have started my video. What were we talking about?
Working with people across different disciplines, different backgrounds and stuff.
Yeah, so you're the interface between the research laboratory and the world of manufacturing. You know how stuff gets made. You can work with manufacturers. You can produce manufacturing drawings. You can negotiate. You can get things manufactured. You're also the interface between the research laboratory and the end user. You're very good at working with people and understanding what the end users actually want and translating what the end users want and need and desire into technical specifications for how electronics should function, for how software should work. So you become the pivotal link, because for a software engineer to write software, they don't want to talk to end users. They might think they do. What they want is a specification. And what they want is a specification that doesn't change, that's completely clear, totally articulated, and fully detailed.
Amazing. Superb questions tonight, guys. Another question coming in from Layla, and this regards to timelines, timeframes, and process. How long did the process for the glove take, and how long did it take to make the final decisions and come to the final idea?
Relatively quick, but longer than it would take in the commercial world. Doing that work in the commercial world would be faster because people would be paying a lot of money for your time. So the work rate in professional product design is very, very fast. We're working with people who are learning, so it gets stretched out. But to take that project through the process you've seen, it was a number of months. Probably, a good estimate will be about 3 months to do that work.
Amazing. And I guess another question tangential to the one that Layla just asked, in terms of, I guess, design process or design as a conversation, and looking at obviously the particular case studies that you showed today in the presentation, is there a typical kind of time frame, or is there a typical process, or kind of the frequency of design, think, do, and so forth?
No. Design is not a process. You need to think and do as much as you need to do to get to a decision. The quicker you do that, the better, as long as you've done enough and as long as you've thought enough. If you can do it in 5 minutes, fantastic. If it needs 5 days, it needs 5 days. If it needs 5 weeks, it takes 5 weeks.
Amazing. Another question coming in from Advythan, and this relates to, I guess, skills and core the background of a designer and design engineer. What are some of the most important skills for a designer or a design engineer to have?
Depends what you mean by skills, because there's lots of skills you can have, and you just expect it to have lots of skills, because if you haven't got those skills, you can't work, And it depends whether you're talking about a product designer or a design engineer, because there's some overlap, but they're different. But it's what we've been talking about. It's the ability to ask the right questions, to be able to do things which are meaningful, to be able to think about them, and that leads then on to further actions, further doing. Design's a practice, and it's important to practice. You can't learn design by doing a degree. That'll get you to the starting point. Well, that won't even get you to start. You're already a designer before you start doing a degree. What you do is you get better and better and better and better and better. If you graduate and never get any better, you're not going to be a very good product designer. Kate and I learn new things, as you do, Ahmed, as Winders, as we all do practicing in product design. You learn new things all the time. So one of the most important attributes rather than skills you can have is intellectual curiosity, is being interested in everything. A rapid ability to learn new things, to talk to new people, and when they talk to you, to be really interested in what they're saying to you, what they do, how they work, how they make things, how their stuff works, so that you can become a pivotal, you can play a pivotal role in that team.
Amazing. And Kate, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, can I just add to that? Because I think all of those things, 100% that, but also a really simple level, a really great ability to communicate. So sketching is a key skill, not to necessarily be doing the most beautiful concept sketches, but just to be able to rapidly communicate ideas with a range of people, and to be able to do really good research really quickly. Absolutely key in everything that we do.
Amazing. And I guess that ties back to, you know, what you guys were mentioning in terms of asking the right questions.
Exactly.
Amazing. Another question coming in from Tony, and it looks like Tony's you know, on fire tonight. Tony's talking about, you know, the client, and obviously you guys have demonstrated activity across multiple disciplines, including obviously the kind of medical technologies, the research focused stuff, experience design, and other innovation areas. But Tony's talking about the client, right? And how do you kind of communicate and understand a client? Because he said that he's certain that they're the most confusing out of everyone.
You need to avoid that because, you know, the client is the person who's paying you. So you need to develop a really good working relationship with your client, and have empathy with what they're trying to produce, because, you know, you can't treat them as a confusing individual or a confusing group of people. You know, you can't be, you need to really have a positive working relationship. So talk to your client. One of the most important things to establish at the start of any design project is, are they actually your client? Are they going to sign off the work? Or are they going to take the work that you've done to somebody who's more senior to them, who you never get to talk to? Because you need to be talking to the person you're working for. You need to establish what the parameters of the work that you're doing are. Like Kate said earlier, where's the end point? Because design has this habit of going on and on and on and on. Because after a while, they start to love you, and they start to really value the time that you spend with them, because you're talking about their stuff all the time and how you're going to improve their stuff and make their life better. And it can sometimes become a bit like therapy, and it never ends. So establish your parameters of engagement, understand your client, and develop a really good working relationship with them. Otherwise, they won't be happy with what you do, they won't pay you, and you won't get any repeat business. Don't be confused by them.
Amazing. What would you add, Kate?
I was just going to say, also understanding their role in the design process, because whilst you are designing whatever you're designing for them, they're not necessarily the ones that are able to make the design decisions for you. So when you look at the case study and you look at all the sketches and prototypes that are laid out on the table, we don't take all of those to the client and say, which should we pick to go forwards? That's our role as a designer, knowing the constraints that we're working to. So being very selective in the work that's shown to the client, so that when there are key decisions, any decision that you offer would be a good decision moving a project forward is really important. So understanding the kind of boundaries between the process and where the client intervenes is really important.
Absolutely, and establishing what those rules of engagement are. You know, your clients come to you because you're a designer. You know, they engage you to do that professional work, the same as they might engage an architect or an engineer or a builder or a mechanic or whatever. So make sure you carefully engage with them and communicate well.
Amazing. And I guess just to kind of conclude, the final question for both of you guys, and it'll be interesting to see your perspective on this. Any final advices or words for the students in terms of, you know, either second years or final years, in terms of something you can share as a piece of advice? An inspiring quote or thought or comment?
Sketch a lot. Get really good at sketching.
It's a great one.
I'd agree with that.
Just be interested in stuff.
Yeah, and so I'd agree with that too.
Yeah. Make connections, talk to people.
Be intellectually curious.
Yeah.
Find stuff out, learn stuff.
And have stuff to
In
say.
the world around you. Have interesting stuff to say. Learn how to talk to people and learn how to listen.
Amazing. Amazing. Thanks, Kate and Andy, obviously, for taking out your time and joining us tonight. A brilliant talk and great discussions there as well in the Q&A session. Thanks for all of the questions, all of you guys as well. So the details of redLoop and Kate and Andy were sent to your emails ahead of the talk, including links to the redLoop website, guys. So definitely feel free to browse and connect and read in more detail as well. To conclude, for all of the participants who've joined tonight, students, staff, alumni, keep an eye out on your emails for the details of the next speaker and links to the next talk as well. So until next week, stay well, stay safe, and thank you guys.
Cheers. Bye-bye.